Good Tuesday morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us from the Ohio AgNet, the voice you know with the news you trust studio, sponsored by the Grain Equipment Company, where innovation meets execution. I'm Joe Everett. Well, currently 41 degrees outside here at the farm this morning, and it's nice to see that harvest is moving along nicely for most parts of Ohio. Later on, we'll check in to see how harvest progress is going with the Ohio Crop Progress Report, but first, looking at the calendar. Tune in on Thursday as the Ohio Field Leader Roadshow heads to Bolivar in Northeast Ohio and is at the farm of Matt Spillman. The Ohio Field Leader is a project of the Ohio Soybean Council and your soybean checkoff. Now looking at some of your agricultural news headlines. Well, a rapid intensification of Hurricane Milton to Category 5 strength has the storm hitting the Tampa Bay region on Wednesday. In this general region, there are several phosphorus production facilities which produce phosphorus fertilizer. One fertilizer analyst believes that the region is going to take a direct hit by the hurricane. This will be bad news for fertilizer prices just weeks before fall fertilizer application season begins in the Corn Belt. Sticking on the topic of fertilizer, Farm Doc from the University of Illinois says the ag sector is closely watching fertilizer markets this week because of the ongoing war in the Middle East. Following months of tight supplies, global nitrogen values started rising last week. The story of the week was Iran's attack on Israel. The Middle East is an important area for fertilizer production in general, but it's especially important for nitrogen. When you look at the attack on Israel, Iran didn't impact any shipping lanes, it didn't have any impact on fertilizer production, yet prices moved higher, says Josh Linville of StoneX. He also says the attack on Israel may have forced the market to finally admit that supplies are tight, and it's manifesting its higher prices. Urea prices are one example of moving higher, up 10% from last week. Linville advises farmers to contact their local fertilizer retailers as soon as possible. Now let's check in with our own Dave Russell as he has an update from this week's Between the Rows.
Time now for Between the Rows, brought to you by Seed Genetics Direct, the #1 fastest growing and largest Ohio-based independent seed company. For Matt Spillman in Stark County, the fall harvest is moving right along.
We're roughly 75% done with the soybeans and a little over 50% with the corn crop. I think it'd be great to be done by Halloween this year, and that's probably a first if we make that happen.
Not only has harvest moved along nicely, corn yields have been pretty consistent.
Kind of started out in that 200 range, so we've had up to 220s on average, and then we've had a few fields down in that 170, upper 170s, 178 range. Corn's been pretty good and pretty steady.
Soybeans, on the other hand.
Soybeans are so dry, or they're early, 8-9%, and some of them pods are split open. I think we could probably figure we lost a bushel or at least off the cutter bar, and you can kind of see those growing in the field now with that rain we got. So, and soybeans, I'd say are a little more disappointing than the corn crop. They look like they'd be 60 plus bushel beans, but you get out in them and they're 50. But I've kind of been hearing that from a lot of people. But just depends if you caught a few of them late rains that were kind of spotty. I think that really added some yield late to them soybeans. But I guess a lot of places we have missed out on those.
Matt Spillman in Stark County. That's Between the Rows, brought to you by Seed Genetics Direct. I'm Dave Russell.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Well, safety should always be a priority on the farm, especially during the busy seasons and when our kids are involved. Dee Jemison, a professor at Ohio State University and is the state leader at OSU Extension Agricultural Safety and Health Program, says safety starts by leading by example.
Your job as a parent is to be a really good safety role model right now when they're young, because they are watching and they see if you're taking shortcuts or if you're not wearing, personal protective equipment, then they're not going to want to wear that. If they're around noisy equipment, then wearing hearing protection is definitely going to be good for them.
When having your kids on the farm and around equipment, the most important thing is keeping an eye on them.
The supervision. I think if you've worked with kids at any time, you know that they are a distraction. They want to talk. They want to show you what they're drawing. They want to show you what they're doing. They do have a really high curiosity level. They want to ask a lot of questions, but supervision is essential and never put them in high-risk environments.
That was Dee Jemison, a professor at The Ohio State University. To listen to the full conversation with Dee, you can find that on this week's Ohio AgNet podcast, which can be found at ohioagnet.com. Stay tuned. We'll be back to take a look at today's weather after this.
Those long days in a tractor cab can really put a cramp in your body. So while refueling or refilling your equipment, walk around the tractor a few times or do a few head-to-toe stretching exercises. When fatigue does set in, that's when injuries and mistakes happen. Know when it's time to take a break and recharge. Let's make sure everyone gets home safe and sound. This message from the Ohio AgNet, OSU Extension, Ag Safety and Health Team, and this station.
Nearly 90% of farmers say that financial worries, constantly changing market conditions, and other uncontrollable variables take a toll on their mental well-being. Add in the weather and family dynamics, well, it's a lot to handle alone. But did you know farmers and their families can receive free confidential services from licensed professionals? Support is available 24/7 to help with the challenges you face. Look for Farm Family Wellness Alliance under the Resources tab at farmfoundation.org. Take care of yourself. Your well-being matters.
Now let's take a look at today's weather, brought to you by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. Here's the forecast.
We've got a dry forecast for 9 out of the next 10 days in Ohio. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin. Let's take a look at your forecast update. We are sunny, warm, and dry for the rest of this week into and through the weekend. As we take a look at it, we're going to be seeing temperatures stair-step up slowly today versus yesterday and tomorrow versus today. And then we're above normal easily for the rest of the week and in through to and through Saturday. Cooler air tries to break free out of Canada late Sunday into Monday of next week. So that's going to give us, I think, a chance at some hit and miss scattered precipitation. I'm looking mostly at Monday. Well, overnight, Sunday night into Monday. Coverage about 60% of Ohio, anywhere from a tenth to maybe half an inch. It's not a big batch of moisture, but it is some moisture. And behind it, we turn significantly cooler for Monday and Tuesday, but we are dry those days. And then moving through the rest of next week, we are back to dry and warm air all the way through Friday the 18th and into Saturday the 19th. Our next front is a front that's coming into the northern plains next to Thursday the 17th, and so it's got a little work to do to make it here. I think it might, but I won't want to guarantee any moisture outside of the hit and miss action that we can see on Sunday night and into Monday. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Well, as combines continue to roll here in the Buckeye State, let's see how the progress is going. The Ohio Crop Progress Report update is sponsored by AgroSpray Drones, empowering rural America through complete spray drone solutions. You can contact them at agrospraydrones.com/Arnold Precision. Starting with the national numbers, corn matured was pegged at 87%, equal to last year and 6 points ahead of the 5-year average of 81%. As for the harvest progress, corn harvest moved ahead 9 percentage points to reach 30% complete. That is 1 point behind last year's 31%, but 3 points ahead of the 5-year average of 27%. As for the crop condition, estimated that 64% of the corn still in the fields was in good to excellent condition, unchanged from the previous week, but above last year's 53%. Looking at soybeans dropping leaves were pegged at 90%, 1 point behind last year's 91%, but 5 points ahead of the 5-year average of 85%. As for the harvest progress, the soybean harvest sped up even more last week, jumping ahead 21 points to reach 47% complete. That is 10 points ahead of last year's 37% and 13 points ahead of the 5-year average of 34%. Looking at the crop condition, estimated at 63% of the soybeans still in the field were in good to excellent condition, down 1 point from 64% the previous week, but still above last year's rating of 51% good to excellent. Looking at winter wheat, planting progress moved ahead another 12 points last week to reach 51% complete nationwide, 1 point behind both last year and the 5-year average of 52%. As for the crop development, an estimated 25% of the winter wheat had emerged. That is equal to both last year and the 5-year average. Now looking at your numbers for the Buckeye State, topsoil moisture condition was rated 46% short to very short, and the average temperature for the week was 64.4 degrees, and that is 6.7 degrees above normal. Corn matured was rated at 84% this week. That jumped 14 points over last week, 24 points ahead of last year, and 20 points ahead of the 5-year average. Corn harvested for grain is at 22%. That is 6 points ahead of last week, 14 points ahead of last year, and 11 points ahead of the 5-year average. Corn harvested for silage is pegged at 93% this week. That jumped 2 points over last week, 9 points ahead of last year, and 3 points ahead of the 5-year average. Soybeans dropping leaves are at 93% this week. That jumped 7 points over last week, 4 points ahead of last year, and 9 points ahead of the 5-year average. Soybeans harvested are at 35% this week. That made some great progress over last week as it gained 12 points, and that is 16 points ahead of last year and 12 points ahead of the 5-year average. Winter wheat planted is at 32% this week. That jumped 15 points over last week, 7 points ahead of last year, but is 4 points behind the 5-year average. Winter wheat emerges at 8% this week, and that is 8 points ahead of last week. As for the crop condition, corn and soybeans are rated 44% good to excellent. To learn more about the Ohio Crop Progress Report and the numbers, you can find that at ohioagnet.com. Stay tuned. We'll be back with the grain analysis and your overnight markets after this.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Farmers, be safe moving from field to field this season. Keep your warning lights clean and in good working order for roadway travel. Take a few minutes to check your lights and reflectors and make sure your slow-moving vehicle emblem is visible as you share the road. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. This message provided to you by the Ohio AgNet, OSU Extension Ag Safety and Health Team, and this station.
It's now time for the Louis Dreyfus Grain Analysis, and that is brought to you by the Ohio Soybean Council and your soybean checkoff. Here's Ryan Martin.
Grain markets finished mixed on it. As we take a look at the numbers, we saw corn up ever so slightly, fractionally to about a penny or so. Beans were down anywhere from 2 to 4 cents, and the wheat markets were 2 to 5, almost 6 cents higher to start the week. Here's what's going on as we take a look back at yesterday's ideas. First of all, China was back from a holiday, or will be back from a holiday for today. Many are hoping and thinking that that renews a little bit of flash sales interest overall. We did not see any kind of flash reported sales yesterday. Weekly export inspections report showed for the week ending October 3rd, 36.7 million bushels of corn were shipped, 52.5 million bushels of beans, 13.3 million bushels of wheat. For the crop years to date, the U.S. has shipped out about 22% more on corn than last year. On beans, equal to last year, and wheat up about 34% over last year. It's too early in the U.S. corn bean export season to make any pace analysis yet, and what is meaningful for the WASDE that comes out on Friday. Brokers report that yesterday Managed Money purchased 3,600 contracts of wheat, 2,600 contracts of corn were basically flat on soybeans. They're selling 4,300 of soybean meal. Macroeconomic outlook has crude oil firmer and producing modest inflows into commodities to start the week. This was evident on the opening with grains unwilling to follow to the lower side of things of the overnight price trend. However, we could never really shake it off on the bean side to get sharply positive. I think the fact that beans were closing so far off the lows was probably a very, very good thing. Yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of the Israel-Hamas war, and now we're seeing an expansion of that war potentially to include Iran. Remember, last week we were just talking about maybe some attacks on Iran-based oil infrastructure. I'm Ryan Martin.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Now let's take a look at your overnight markets, brought to you by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. While things are mixed in Chicago, red for corn and soybeans, but green for the wheat. Let's start off with December corn, $4.25, down a penny. March corn, $4.41.5, down 1 1/4. May corn, $4.50.5, down a penny. Looking at soybeans, November soybeans, $10.27 1/4, down 6 3/4. January soybeans, $10.45 3/4, down 6 3/4. March soybeans, $10.61, down 6 3/4. December wheat, $5.95, up 2 1/2. March wheat, $6.19 1/4, up 2 3/4. Looking at livestock from yesterday's close, October live cattle, $187.47, up 47 cents. December live cattle, $187.02, up 2 cents. October lean hogs, $83.97, down 5 cents. December lean hogs, $76.82, up 67 cents. November feeder cattle, $249.15, down 12 cents. And January feeder cattle, $246.17, up $1.80. Have a great day, everyone. I'm Joe Everett, and you're listening to the Ohio AgNet.